A very warm welcome to you all. Welcome to Designing Cities for All,
the 2-year activity program of Pakhuis de Zwijger,
in which we take a deep dive into designing products,
places and systems for all.
At every level, we can see certain communities being marginalized, being taken advantage of, and it's all part of the design.
When you're neurodiverse, you're in a world that isn't designed for you.
We're not the only species on the planet. The city needs to be also a city for the other species.
And we need to do something because the old structures in which we worked don't work.
Things won't change just if we just let things happen.
Instead of saying, what can we do to mitigate the impacts? We need to start asking ourselves, what is causing that?
Design is political, that we need to design processes, that we are all different, but there are things that unite us.
These are the things that need to be on the table, that need to be recovered in order to redesign the society.
Everything around us was once designed and can therefore be redesigned.
How do we teach design in a way where students can be really critical of the systems of power that have informed and dominated design?
Inclusion happens by design or not at all.
I think it's always some kind of a co-creation process, and you have to make very little steps and then figure out together what works and what doesn't.
It takes as much time to do something good as it takes time to do something bad.
All design tells a story.
But there's also a bit of a need to not just write ourselves into the past, but also kind of write ourselves into the future.
I invite you so much to join my path of liberation, and I'm hopefully being welcomed by your path of liberation.
We have to heal collectively. We have to help each other understand some of these constructs that actually divide us.
Not fitting in was a blessing, or I would have turned out just like you.
A warm welcome to you all. We just saw a wrap-up of the first 2 years of Designing Cities for All. And of course, that is a research and activities program that takes a deep dive into designing products, places, and systems for all. We've been doing this for almost 4 years, and we're entering the final stage of this project now, which I think is nice, but also very sad, because we have to say goodbye to this programming, but not without having a final fantastic program. Because in 2023, 2024, we have been exploring the concept of regenerative design. And together with Designing Cities for All's fellows and lots of designers, storytellers, and artists, we learn more about how we can redesign a world in a way that we can recover and strengthen the systems so that people and everything beyond the human can bloom. The program tonight is the third and last episode of City Games in the Age of Urban AI with Ekim Tan. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can give her a hand. Ekim, you're also the last fellow of Designing Cities for All. How does that feel?
It's a big honor.
We've got 3 guests that I would like to introduce to you in a bit. And we're going to talk about how AI can inspire design practices and seek further engagement with society, technology, and politics, and how these technologies can shape the future of designers' roles in shaping the future of our cities. But before we dive into the conversation, we'd like to welcome you, the audience here, but also the audience looking at home. And if you are at home and you have any questions or remarks, or you would like to be involved within the conversation, that is possible because we're using menti.com. And if you go to menti.com and enter the code 21810590, we'll see it on screen as well. We'll make sure the questions or the remarks ends up in this conversation. And I would like to ask the people here to log into menti.com as well, because there are a couple of questions that we're going to ask the audience, and then we'll can involve your opinions into the conversations as well. Okay, without any further ado, I would like to introduce the panel to you all. We already heard and applauded for Ekim Tan, who is the 6th and final Designing Cities for All Fellow, and who's also the founder of Play the City, an architect and an urbanist. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's a perfect summary.
What would you like to add to that description? What's more?
I think maybe I would like to talk about what we do as Play the City. So it's a city gaming studio. We are urbanists and architects, and we design games since last 14 years, working mostly with cities. And when we were approached for this fellowship, we could have been talking about city games, but we thought, well, let's do something that we don't know about, and research what AI can mean or would collaborate with city games, yes or no. So this also for us a search, and every expert that is here sharing their expertise with us is super valuable. So I'm really happy. I feel very privileged to have amazing guests and looking forward to the conversation.
We all are. And now, what would you like to add? Something personal that we don't know yet about you.
Just
you better prepare, because I'm going to ask you all this question. It's the final one. I can do whatever I want.
That I think I'm a city person. I was educated as an architect, but at the end of my architecture education, I was getting super interested in cities. And I am still, after so many years, I find cities super complex.
This is work. I would have a guilty pleasure or anything juicy. Give me something.
Oh my. But maybe my interest about children's books.
Yes. Who's your favorite children's writer?
Yeah, I am discovering books of Harari. Also, he is writing children's books lately. That's also in general. I think in the whole Tonke Dracht, for example, in the Dutch context, the Dutch children are really, I think being verveeld, how we say that?
Bored?
Not verveeld, but it's such a luxury situation that there are so many good writers and illustrators that are making Dutch children books.
Thank you. Seated next to you is Babusi Nyoni, and you're a tech entrepreneur, CEO, and at Sila Health, right?
Correct.
What would you like to add to that?
I would like to add that I work at the intersection of emerging technology and the needs of underrepresented communities, typically just critiquing new tech and putting it in a context where it wouldn't typically have representation. So putting AI in, like low to middle income communities in Southern Africa, for example. And I think I'll just cap it at that for now.
Nice. Yeah. Guilty pleasure.
Guilty pleasure. I mean, not that, but a personal thing I do have to share is that on the Uber ride here, my driver basically had this panel discussion with me the entire way. So this is my second time doing this evening.
That's good. You're already warmed up.
Exactly.
Very good. Warm welcome to you as well. Seated next to you is Mayra Kaptein. You're the founder of Het Verbond, a social psychologist and a designer.
Correct.
Anything you would like to add to that?
I'm assuming something guilty, personal.
Not yet. Just anything work-wise, and then we get to the juicy part.
So work-wise, we design and develop interventions that make the public space one that takes better care of people, of citizens. And we do that by combining psychology, design practices, and a lot of collaboration. Because if there's one thing that I learned is like if you don't have support for your really great idea, it's not a great idea at all.
Ah, interesting. And now we get to the juicy bit. What's the guilty pleasure?
I love kickboxing. I can kick your ass.
That took a wrong turn very quickly. Okay, well, thank you. And our final guest, but not the least, of course, is Ronnie Bulent-Ozel, and you're the co-founder of Lucid Minds AI.
Yeah, correct.
Anything you would like to add to that?
Maybe I must say Lucid Minds AI is an R&D collective based in Amsterdam, and we aim to use data science, AI, or technologies together with societal and economical issues to see how we can bring them to practice. So, and the motto is how we can diminish the gap between theory and practice. So that's what we do.
Right.
Yeah.
And now, The question that you knew that was
Yeah,
coming.
okay, I haven't prepared. But,
But that's the good part of it.
so I'm a Lindy Hopper, advanced
Really?
dance.
Do we all know Lindy Hop? It's kind of,
No.
yeah.
And these days, I'm like a furniture in Mesrop because I go up to storytelling.
Oh.
Amateurish.
Very nice, very nice. Well, thank you so much. Well, I'm the host for today, and I'll share the guilty pleasure. I know everything about the Eurovision Song Contest. Ask me anything, any song, I know it, probably. All right. Babusi, I would like to ask you, you've developed healthcare solutions with AI. How does technology reshape personal engagement, such as connecting with doctors? Because for some, it's a nightmare not to be able to talk to a doctor anymore, but to log in and have a computer decide what is ailing you.
Yeah, I mean, a stark contrast already is the difference in the way we engage health systems here versus how people where I'm from in Zimbabwe engage health systems. The doctor-patient ratios in a lot of countries in Africa go all the way up to 1 to 5,000. So that's one doctor for 5,000 people. And what that means is that the relationship people have with their healthcare providers is one where they would only speak to a doctor if they're certain they would die if they don't speak to a doctor, because of the burdens that a lot of these public health hospitals and clinics have. So we created a chatbot that started to take the pressure off of private healthcare, public healthcare, in allowing people to get instant answers about their health. And yeah, I'll speak more about the process of building that specifically, but it was just interesting already 5 years ago to think about a way in which AI could be used to bridge like an institutional void in a way that's very direct and tangible without all this like buzz around the potential for it, but really just solving a problem.
We'll dive into that a bit more in a minute. Ekim, this is the third and final program that we've made with you. Could you tell us what you take away from the first programs that we did together?
So yes, this is a 3-program fellowship, and now we are in the design case. But we earlier had also a case on digitization and also democracy, so 3D digitization, democracy, and design. And in the first part, what we were doing was looking at the digital transition that we are in as urban development and in general urban cities. And what was happening with smart cities, and in comparison to that with urban AI, what sort of changes did we see in terms of the trends, for example? And what we were concluding was, for example, general tendencies of AI when compared to, for example, the city-based solutions from the smart city era, was that we were going more, let's say, towards generic or maybe more global, and sometimes also one of our as experts was mentioning maybe towards more potentially colonizing solutions. And that was also maybe also, again, with the solutions from within AI, it was responded with, for example, instead of big data, thick data, and then more social data being fed into the systems. And another thing that we were looking at, for example, another trend that we have looked at was increasing hybridization. So in smart cities, for example, we were seeing seamless sensors looking at the data and digitization cities and collecting data from cities. What we will be seeing with urban AI with drones, safety robots, self-driving cars, etc. All these things that have been, we traditionally used as seamless are coming to the city space, and we have to interact with them. We have to see how we deal with them. And I think the last one that we were looking at is like automation towards versus autonomy in urban AI. So then like the question of, especially when the designers looking at the AI is, hey, well, this is good because it's going to give us more space to become more creative because it's taking all the repetitive work. But then the question of whether not only automation, but also can AI become itself as an autonomous designer, or like take a more autonomous position to analyze, to predict, or to prescribe, even to take over the let's say the design field by itself or not. I think these were the three things we looked at in the first episode. And then in the second one, we were looking at the governance question, like, hey, what will be the role of urban AI in terms of decision-making structures, And I think that was a little bit more, let's say, pessimistic episode. Everybody was warning about, the position of the tech giants and what it will do potentially to the democracy, etc. So we had one expert who was inviting us, hey, there is not only the classical, let's say, the representative democracy and only elections, but there are more different forms of democracies and decision-making forms where AI still can be relevant, and a bit like inviting the teams to be a bit more optimistic. And I expect from today's episode and with the guests we have, and I generally how designers welcome AI as a design tool, let's say, more optimistic and maybe more positive roles for AI potentially.
Yeah, because is it possible, in your opinion, and we're going to talk about that later as well, to foster new agencies or to amplify underrepresented voices through AI?
Yes, I think also we will see, for example, like more than representing of more than human agents, or bringing underrepresented questions or challenges, or making them more represented or communicate with them much more effectively. There may be a very positive role to play. And also what we want to look at today is, again, I think potential role of designer with the AI, how we will collaborate with it.
Is there still a role for designers within AI?
My position, if you ask me, I think that some of the positions that designers will have will disappear while new ones will emerge. But it would be, I think, good if we tonight become more specific on those. And I think I also see AI not only as an automation tool that will make my job easier, but I really see it as a collaborator. A design agent by itself that will enrich the narratives, that will bring in an underrepresented agents more to the foreground, and I think there are positive things to discuss today.
Brilliant, because I would like to start with you. I see you nodding in agreement, so I'm very curious why, but also you're the co-founder of Lucid Minds AI, as we already said, and you create a long-term strategic solution for climate change and social inequities. How do you do that? Because what we hear a lot is that AI and the algorithm is being trained by a certain frame of reference, and other narratives, and talking about equality, are not represented. How do you do that in the framework of climate change?
Yeah, thanks. There are lots of discussions about the theories and the constructive ways of using it. What we do is, can we bring theories to practices through certain principles? When we look into these problems are complex problems, and then one of the fundamental issues we look into through the ingredients of complex systems. So that's important, which means that there will be multiple different agency, underrepresented, overrepresented, and there will be interactions between these agencies. And
but how do you go about it? Because the systems that we are using now in AI systems are very excluding. Sorry. And how do you turn that around to be more inclusive?
Thanks for the question, because all we know right now, all we talk about is Gen AI, which is one form of AI, which is based on connections and statistics about the data that has been observed. There are different types of AIs that can be combined, and luckily, I see even big AI labs trying to combine them. One of the things we do, we use multi-agent modeling perspective in most of our applications, which is looking into behavioral data or components of it. We model those agents. Like in our cases, our agents. One of the examples we're looking into is like how we can actually represent every single tree in any size of forest. So that means we need to look into all the scientific information, but also how they interact with each other and represent them within the model. So then these agents represent actually reality to some extent, and that gives it a chance to actually observe things that we will not be able to observe based on existing data or based on assumptions. This is one of the instruments.
But creating data or using data is also limiting, because you have to make a choice. You can't do everything. How can you make sure that that it's a realistic set of data that you're using?
that's really great question, and we could go into details quite a lot. And one of the way out is not completely relying on what data we have. Because everyone talks garbage in, garbage out. That explains it. So, but there are ways to regenerate data with control, with causality. Even in some cases, we may need to add bias, controlled bias into data. You are going to use LLM models. There are different kinds of models. So one way to out is really looking in these different types of AI models, integrating it, what's out there. And that's how we will be able to give maybe reasoning, explanation, transparency, more structured designs.
Thank you. We've talked about with you about inclusion, but Myra, if I go to you, if you look at the psychological and ethical part of using AI, do you believe that technology can better serve the public?
Absolutely. I think that's about all that I do. And I think it's really interesting that you named the interaction of psychology and design. I feel like with the products that most of us have in our pockets over here, the technology that we use most, they are really fundamentally built on psychology. That's what the head of product of Facebook, for example, said. Like, we're basically all just psychologists for the masses. And I feel like the public systems, they're very often not really very consciously designed. So a lot of the systems and the services that we are working with, I think they have been under-designed for a really long time, because if we make it too nice, then people are going to use it too much. So to answer your question, I think, it's ethical to design the services very mindfully, especially the ones for the most underprivileged people in our society. And then we can use psychology. It's very often used to basically manipulate us into buying stuff we don't really need.
Exactly.
Or using products we don't really need. But you can use the same knowledge and understanding of the human psychology to motivate people to take care of themselves and each other, to increase access, to understand how people work, and then design the public systems and services around that, and make it really easy for people to use them.
Well, when you talk about using psychology, because algorithms in my mind those are very conscious, very clear, and very, it's very clear what set of data is being used and how you apply it. If you look at psychology, human psychology often is irrational, often is not always very predictable. How do you use that unpredictability, if that's a word, within the systems that you are designing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think the AI products that we tend to use, they also really do it from a stance of understanding our irrationality. So, for example, ChatGPT will get to know you and what kind of user you are, and adjust the tone of voice and the things it says based on what it reads out of you. So I think really good products are always molding itself to the psychology of their users.
Yeah, but that's copying psychology in a logical way, and humans often are illogical. Yeah. So how do you include that into the system? Is it possible to include that in the system?
I think it's a really important starting point for the system. So, for example, what we're seeing over here, one thing that we know in psychology is this idea of cognitive load. And when people visit a doctor, their cognitive load is super duper high. So they remember like 20% of the information that the doctor usually gives you, and half of that is actually wrong. So the idea, if you click play, then it starts playing, or it should start playing. It doesn't. All right, maybe go to a few previous ones, then I can give it another example. Now, back. I can just explain. So what we did in healthcare is you have, for example, here avatars of your own healthcare workers, from the insight that people they follow relationships much more than information. So it's the relationship with your own family doctor, for example, that can motivate people. So using that insight into psychology, that it's relationships that drive healthy behavior or not. We work with that, build that into the product, and then collaborate with AI to, it may give the ingredient of what would be a good answer, but then the layer of design over it, so the avatar of your own personal doctor, that's what makes a difference and makes it connect to people's psychological needs.
What I'm very curious about is the fact that often technological steps were being presented as the quality of things are going to be higher. So if you take this, for example, the doctor or your healthcare professional knows more about you, so it can spend more time, you know, diving into your specific case. But what we saw with, for example, email, is that because we have an easier connection, so you should have more time on your hands to do other things. It only increased the workload, it increased the pressure. So how do we prevent this from being a tool that increases the workload on doctors and limits the time that you have with a healthcare professional?
Yeah, that's a really important question that you ask, because I think that is really a big danger with AI, that it is just from a frame of increased productivity. So a really important thing there is actually governance, going back to governance. So agreeing with the people that are making this, that agency and health differences are actually the thing that we're optimizing for. So then the AI becomes a tool there. And so whatever you do, it needs to increase agency and decrease healthcare differences. So I think it's needed that doctors, that we improve productivity there, because the way it is going right now, there needs to be a productivity increase.
Why?
Because if the predictions are that the way our healthcare system is set up right now, in a few years, we'll need 1 out of 4 people here in the Netherlands.
Also the aging population.
Yeah, because of the aging population. And well, what the family doctors told us is that between 30 to 50% of their consultations are actually things that they are not really trained for, that are not really the things that they think is most important. It is not serving the most underrepresented communities. And the health differences in the Netherlands are gigantic. There's 24 years in difference between the healthiest 20% and the poorest 20%. And that's something I feel like 24 healthy years. We need to change. Yeah.
There was
go ahead.
There was also some research, you probably are aware of that, that in the Dutch healthcare system, people who get cancer, I think the higher educated are systematically better treated compared to the lower educated, and it's not the system is not designed on purpose like this, I think, but it appears like that.
So maybe we could go to Babusi, because at Sila Health, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with underrepresented voices there?
So I think, first of all, I really love the insights from your response. So one thing that we grappled with immediately was trying to understand people. So the way in which people communicate about their health in the areas that we were serving was very different from what is documented online in the global north. So a chatbot made in the Netherlands or in Britain could barely be applicable in sub-Saharan Africa, because the way people talk about ailments in relation to their body is very different. So we had to already know from the jump that we couldn't use some out-of-the-box solution. So we prototyped a way to start to measure the way in which people speak about their health, and we just built a basic like an Excel spreadsheet with a decision tree that allowed like yes/no responses, but then allowed us to also capture the natural responses people were sending. This was happening on Facebook Messenger. Why Facebook Messenger, you ask? Sub-Saharan Africa also has some of the most expensive internet in the world, and what that means is that people's relationship with the internet is very different to yours. So people don't have a culture of Googling their symptoms, for example, because accessing the internet on something open-ended like Google is more expensive than just WhatsApping or Facebooking your friends, because that's subsidized by these companies, or at least the telecoms companies make it easier for you to access these chat platforms. But then what that means is that for a lot of people, being on the internet is being on Facebook or Meta. So you have to build for these platforms despite any feelings you might have about, you know, who runs them. And back to my point, prototype this way to see and understand how people spoke about their health. And we started to see how, because of the necessity of the intervention, people were just being overly polite in the way they interacted with it. It was, you know, for a lot of people, their only access to some form of healthcare. So we really had to think around the language and understanding the language before we even get to a symptom or a disease, just around being cordial and understanding people.
But what I'm worried about when I hear your story, it's also about a certain kind of privilege, because there are the privileged people that have access to Facebook or WhatsApp. But also in how do you make sure that the people are not being who don't have the access or are not being heard? How do you make sure that their voices are being heard as well, or included as well?
I think it's, you know, as a not necessarily a lone actor, but someone who's identified an institutional void and has seen the applicability of a technology like AI in bridging that gap. You really want to focus on what is actually possible in the vast chasm of what is not possible, and just make sure that is as optimum, as safe, as I guess dependable as possible. So people at scale, hundreds of thousands of simultaneous conversations can happen, and people feel that they do have access to an alternative to waiting hours in a public hospital or waiting to see a doctor. So there's, of course, the other side of the moon, where there are people who are still not yet online, who still don't have access to a device that can access the internet. For people like that, there's initiatives in East Africa with community healthcare workers, for example, where there's one individual within the community, like a nurse or someone who's upskilled, who can handle all of this with some kind of network effect. So one-on-one conversations with people, then the device owner is the one that has to, you know, upload all the information and whatnot. So there's ways to scale it for people who don't have access to the internet, but then for those that do, there's platforms like ours, for example, that democratize that.
Yeah, thank you for now.
Cool.
I would like to throw it to the audience sitting at home, but also here, and that's why I'd like to ask you to use your menti.com access, because we do have access here. And there's a question I would like to pose, and then we're going to talk about it with you, Ekim, as well. And the question is, how can AI foster new relational systems that are inclusive and accessible? So how can AI foster new relational systems that are inclusive and accessible? If you go to menti.com, you could leave us your suggestions as well, and they will pop up on screen here. Ekim, can I start with you? How can we do that?
Yeah, I have actually to be, I think, in the name of being very concrete, I brought some slides. So I will maybe go through them, and I think, and also for the field of city planning and city development, maybe I can be, just as concrete as these ones.
Yeah, and then we'll return to the Menti answers just after the slides. Yeah?
Okay. So what I have here is a couple of AI applications that have been now on the market, that are on the market and that are being proposed, for example, for our field of urban planning. And what you see is, in general, I think the power of AI in terms of communication, visual communication, is very much pushed to the front. So, for example, in Urbanist AI, what we have is people who discuss with each other about their values. There is a AI visualization that kind of, takes these keywords and then starts, maybe we can move to the second slide, starts visualizing for people to say, oh, do you mean this kind of street? Or do you mean this kind of public space? And then I think designers welcome these kind of applications in the sense that it kind of really makes the communication between the layman and the expert really fast. Yeah. So this kind of 2D applications that makes it easier. And I think maybe if we move quickly to the second one, what we see also is that I think this is maybe in the name of optimization, in this case of urban blocks, number of housing units, etc. So I think what we call actually site planning, urban planning, in urban planning is very much automated actually with urban AI, that you get all the different factors that you need to take into account, and the thing actually calculates for you. And then I think that's a way of looking at all the options that you have, and then and you can move on. And I think maybe if you move to the other example that AI can mean to the next one, is I think again working on the visualization powers of AI, but then in this case the digital twin, public digital twin, where we see not a 2D but a 3D visualization of an urban area, where the app can reach out to citizens, where they can come up with their reactions, and then the thing can collect as much as reactions from the audience, from the neighborhood or residents, and then it can report and it can look at the different patterns, for example, in this case. And I think another way that we see urban planning is, maybe if you move on to the next one, I think this is actually, in a way you can say street view, but a better visualize, and then you can visualize actually the future of a neighborhood, for example, and then you can see what are the proposed different blocks in an urban setting, whether you like it, or as a citizen what you feel about that. And I think this one, Playground City, is also, I think City of Amsterdam is pushing this forward, and what we see is here is an AI platform where you can see different participation processes that are coming up or that are existing, where a chatbot can communicate with. I think visualization or data collection and visualization is one thing, but also you can actually, in a very light way or a low threshold way, talk with the AI to understand, what is coming up, what are the different important things that you need to know, or leave your ideas behind it just with a very low threshold digital poll, like in this one, for example.
Thank you. Let's return to the Mentimeter, because I've got some answers here on my iPad as well. I would like to read those and ask for your reaction. One answer was, make high-end solutions easily available for everyone. You're nodding. Why?
I think that's the fundamental way to democratize it. And pushing in this direction is really essential.
Can you give an example how you can do that?
One example, if we look into the frontier, for instance, in the large language models, if we would have publicly controlled, trained language models accessible to any developer or whoever comes with the idea, which can be at the front end of what's going on, that will create lots of opportunities and ideas for a lot more people than experts.
But I think the keywords are publicly controlled, which AI at the moment is not.
So one way to democratize is to be able to see how we train with these models, who have access to it, and how we can explain. There are lots of the aspects that still makes them black boxes. If we would have collective, communal, or publicly created led AI models in Gen AI, that will give a lot more space to new ways of interacting with it.
Is that a real possibility? But because we see that corporations are leading in the development of AI, that we see that governments are lagging behind and haven't got any idea how to go about it. Myra, is it feasible to have that responsibility within a public controlled system? Because at the moment it's not, and it's being kept from the public.
Well, I think the public is also working with the private companies. So, and personally, I think it's up to the public to set really good regulation on it, so that
is it up for the public to do that, or is it a responsibility of the government?
Yeah, sorry, the governments and the public systems, or the public services, they when there's better regulation, you have better models to work with.
But I don't see that happening within now and the next 10 years or whenever.
But on the side of being positive today, right? Now we can say that if you look into the fierce competition, usually the gap between privatized proprietary AI models and open source models are more than 1.5 years, and this gap is getting reduced.
Yeah,
I think that's a very good sign. Yeah. And the models are becoming smaller, which means the consumption of electricity, the use of garbage data is also reduced. So there is a chance, the quite positive chance, that we will be able to have accessible, not super environmentally side affected AI models. So that's this gap is getting closer. And LLMs are not the only AI models. That's something we need to look into.
I'm struggling with time restraints because I do see a lot of remarks there. Let's choose one in order to see what we could talk with you as well. One of the remarks is study human behavior equally and model their behavior to analyze, aggregate results. Is the inequality of a product of the system, is the inequality a product of the system or a product of their own behavior? Uncover hidden biases. Anybody who would like to react to that?
I think it's actually what you were talking about, this hidden bias that is already in the system right now. So why people that are more highly educated are getting better healthcare service is because of the social capital that is needed to interact with the healthcare system right now. So what we've heard when talking to especially underrepresented communities, they were saying like the interacting with the healthcare system right now is like a negotiation. And they're feeling like they're not getting the better end and they are being sent home with a paracetamol. So if you then need to transform the healthcare system and make it less medicalized and sending more people maybe to social work instead of to a specialized doctor, that's friction right there. So about that question, how can you then make it less dependent on the social capital that you have, understanding how the system works, the language, being more comfortable in the negotiation. That's also a very cultural thing. Like, are you going to contest the doctor and are you going to go for what you want? It's a very cultural thing. So breaking that open, making it tangible, I think that's where AI can make things very tangible, use much bigger data sets and really empower healthcare professionals to empathize more, basically, more diverse.
Well, and that's interesting because the work that you do focuses on co-designing research and the systemic change. Yeah. How would you use the knowledge that you have in order to promote this change and to deal with the biases or the lack or the social capital people do or do not have?
So how we work is it's an intervention in the system, right? So systems change, you cannot control it. You can just look at the system, try to understand it, talk to as diverse people as possible, and then propose an intervention where you feel like if we change this little thing, it might be able to have a bit of a breakthrough effect to systems change. But you cannot control systems change. It's just probing, measuring, listening, and trying again, and doing that as early and often as possible.
Do you agree with that? Because you are trying to change the system as well. So can you control it, or do you just have like to take the opportunity and see what effect it does have?
I mean, where we're operating, we just have to do what we need to do and then see how that works down the line in integrating into the overall systems. There's no initial intent to like change a system. We just actually want to solve real tangible problems. But then what is interesting is just to see the overlap in our approach to making health a personal issue for people, for whom it's typically something that's on a community level or not really something that they feel they have autonomy over, and just making that something that, they're more proactively taking the lead on taking care of themselves and you know, having that health journey as something that they're initiating, and then seeing how that's also applying here in the way that you're looking at.
That sounds like systems change to me.
But not by design, just by accident for sure. But then what is interesting is you know, with your initiative, changing the relationship people have with their households, for example, and seeing, you know, how that would have a much more positive yield for people who, as you mentioned, have much lower outcomes based on their position economically than people with a higher position. So seeing some similarities there in very different contexts, but I think that personalization and the fact that AI allows for that is a common thread for sure.
Final remark, because I would like to go to the second part, but final remark.
As of system change, I will make a really short remark. There are ways to also consider system as a whole and simulate that system with the controlled experiments, which one of the techniques we are using with multi-agent systems in economy, also in the growth of the forest and this environmental impacts. That actually gives quite insight.
Yeah.
There are different ways of when we don't have money, time, and life force.
Let's see whether we can include that conversation into the next question as well, because the second question I would like to pose to you again is what societal or ecological topics are at the forefront of AI innovation? So what societal or ecological topics are at the forefront of AI innovation? I'll give you the time to respond. I'd like to go to you, Ekim.
Yeah, okay. I also, again, I have brought another film to give an example, but I think what I see, for example, in informal towns, how AI can help visualize those settlements, which I think, I mean, if you don't exist on the map, you can, I think maybe we can listen to the...
So Abigail, I feel like we're in a typical neighborhood that's really hard to map.
So in the global south, settlements are more informal. Varieties of building structures makes it more difficult and almost impossible to completely map out.
Yeah, I think this is a very concrete example where AI directly starts helping when you start visualizing communities, start one by one teaching AI how a household looks like or how a building looks like in an informal settlement, and it starts learning and start helping you map out and then see where the help or the streets or, you know, the city structure needs to change. I think this is again like the in the first part that I was talking about the power of visualization and how that can really support. But also, I think what in Bulansburg, what he is doing in representing like more than human agents and bringing them into the conversation more directly. So giving them agency is another form where AI can really strengthen let's say the underrepresented parts within the design debate further.
Right. We've got some responses through Menti, and the first I would like to start with is tea.
Very interesting insight.
Any reactions to Tino? Let's start with development of neighborhoods and evolution over time. Is anybody here who used that? Because I don't know whether it's very clear. How can you use development? Because the example that you gave is about the development of neighborhoods, the informal creation of neighborhoods, and the evolution of time. If you use that as a databases, data, you can...
It's a prediction tool. AI is a prediction. So it's like as AI learns the patterns, the spatial patterns, for example, can it also start... I think what you're doing more, building future prediction models where it can tell you, hey, where the settlement is going, where the extensions are, or where help needs to be if there is a flood, or if there is also in terms of resilience. I think that's a relevant part where AI can also
as a prediction tool, right? Bulent, I think this question is for you as well. How should we incorporate technology in connecting to nature, climate, and social context versus the 20th century approach of excluding them?
Yeah, I think as Ekim was saying, one of the leading work we are trying to do is how we can extend our understanding of other life forms, being trees, birds, worms. We don't have the data. We have some scientific knowledge. To some extent, we can understand certain behaviors, their interactions, but we don't have the data that would typically fit into existing AI models. So how we do that, we look into specific information that has been done through the science, building behavioral models of those agents, and then simulating their interactions, growth. A tree becomes happy, gets sick, interacts with the environment, and then we are able to see what will happen if we have an urban park here with that composition of species under this climate change. How many of them will die? How they will evolve? Another way is that, like, we took Vliegenbos, one of the park here, one of the researchers, and there was a big debate about, shall we have a new bike line in the park? And then when we looked into it, it's one of the densest, only dense enough park where certain glowing worms can survive. So what happened, we would look into scientific knowledge of this worm, what's the life cycle of this, how that interacts with it, and then looking into intervention mechanisms to see what will happen when we do this design. This kind of synthetic data generation with the data, with science, will enable us, in a way, give voice to unheard entities.
But what I wonder about is that if you use it as a prediction tool, and that's what I hear you saying as well, is that what we learned about climate change is that the models that we use to predict climate change, maybe AI infused as well, are not that reliable because nature takes its own course.
Well, one of the principle I always try to promote is that we need models. They are useful, but all models are wrong. So the fact is how we can iterate over these models, capturing reality, that's the way we can go.
It can help you create scenarios, different scenarios, and most of the scenarios that you will create and you will speculate on will not work. But at least you have studied it, and then in the case that it doesn't work, what happens then when it does, or when something else happens? I think it gives you
that realization that it's not the truth, it's not the prediction of what really is happening, but it's a set of scenarios that you can prepare for and that you can adapt to, and probably the real scenario is going to be something completely different. That makes it something that you can use as a fundament instead of use as a base for reality.
I'd like to say one example. I did lots of these kind of works with economic simulations. We need to be able to look into different scenarios. What's happening? Once we see all these AI models, existing AI models, they are based on statistic average. But when we create different scenarios, look into outliers. These outliers are giving interesting information. So then we need to look into different circumstances with more unexpected scenarios and seeing what's happened. So in that case, the AI models need to combine collective knowledge, which is what is happening with all data-driven statistical AI models, with more controlled, ontological, explainable models that we can combine. Then we can actually leverage the power of prediction.
Babus, can I ask you the next question? One of the remarks that are being made is co-designing nature-based solutions, simulate a vulnerability, and design both resilient and just cities with the output. Why I pose that to you is that because you were focusing on contextualizing developments for different cultural and geographical environments. If you use that co-design for nature-based solutions, can you do that and simulate vulnerability and design both resilient and just?
I'm not sure about the simulation bit. I think he'd have it covered for sure.
Why are you not sure about the simulation bit?
Because we go straight into like use cases, so we barely have time to imagine the reality. You know, we would actually just go right into the communities where we need the intervention and do research in that sense. But the time and ability to like simulate requires, you know, these like agents that you could also with synthetic data be able to run these ideas of what might happen and also take these outliers into consideration. But what we do with the very limited data that we have in the societies that we have our interventions in, is just actually just go directly on the ground and see what's possible. This is a screen recording of an application that we built in collaboration with the geriatric nursing home in Bulawayo to help nurses diagnose Parkinson's disease by measuring accurately a change in a patient's posture over time. So this is the kind of stuff that we would do. I would actually love a reality where we would kind of have this like nexus of what you're able to do versus these institutional voids I'm just consistently identifying as a person who grew up problem solving, and see what scenarios we could run with what's possible right now and see what's the best way to do it without actually having to do something. Yeah.
How do you adapt to different cultural or societal contexts?
Yeah, I mean, not to make it boring, but so we work very closely with language and language models. So just again into a very like technical conversation, but we, as mentioned earlier, had to figure out the ways in which people spoke about their health, but then also taking very different languages into context and learning, for example, that the more we simplified the English version of the platform, the easier we could machine translate it to other languages because there was not much nuance lost. So in a way, just watering down the way in which we communicated about health just actually made it more accessible to more people. We of course had to benchmark the accuracy of that, but yeah, it's interesting. Like once you have something that's actively being used, actively solving a problem, and just the clock is already ticking once the first person says hi, and you're now just trying to optimize to ensure that their privacy is absolutely protected, the outcomes absolutely guarantee, better control over their health and all these other variables at play that you get like really like on the ground, which I'm still excited at the possibility of modeling in future. Once we have enough data, we're trying to collect as responsibly as possible enough data for these kinds of things to be possible. But for now, yeah, it's a lot of like getting
data.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you for now. I would like to give the public the opportunity to ask questions, but after the third question, what I would like to pose here, and then we could have some responses from the people that are sitting here as well. The third question that I would like to pose is, how is AI changing the role of designers?
Question of all questions.
Of course. What's your idea by that?
I think that, the experts that as far as I can follow are really not deciding on this one question. So 50% of the experts say, well, we human beings, we are so inclined to see ourselves super unique. We think that we are the only ones who can design, and AI will never be able to design as good as we can design. And then there are some experts who actually say that hey, we know what we want, the culture, the value sets, etc. So the human beings will remain designers forever, and the computers can only support them. So these are the two views that we have, and I have also here a video shot that I brought with me, and I would like to maybe if you can put the sound on so people can hear.
Let's take a real-world example. The Delve team recently worked with a developer on a 12-acre mixed-use project near London. Delve uncovered options with more usable area than the developers found in their initial baseline designs, identifying hundreds of additional housing units and increasing investment return. And these new options still preserved the original goals for daylight access and open space.
So this Delve is an app that's developed by Sidewalk Labs, that's Alphabet, that's Google. And if you really look at the tool, super powerful. It looks at the data crunching, like the finance crunching part. It looks at what the engineers do. It looks at what the designers do, and then make sure that it's all integrated and combined. And if you were careful in the beginning of the video, it says, let's look at the case where Delve team collaborated with the developer, which means that anything in between, all the engineers, all the architects are not relevant anymore because the Delve team who developed the AI works directly with the developer, or or a city department. I don't know anyone. So I think that's really interesting to see where in the text what is hidden. So anyway, I think further going into that debate. I also have good news for designers. I think that
we're very curious about that.
I think until maybe since last 50 years, let's say, in the last century, we had the role of the master architect who was making cities like Le Corbusier, etc. And then we have a little bit of downslope for designers, where we saw the experts, the specialists took over. So the architects were a little bit at the background. So you would see the ecologists and other, a lot of other people who could calculate, very detailed specialists who were taking the stage. And what a lot of people predict now is that with the AI coming into the field, the generalists, like designers, architects, potentially come to the foreground. Specialists will go to the background, and then people who actually are trained to, recognize patterns, who can understand and design structures, who can combine different sets of knowledge in an integrated, holistic, meaningful results, will probably prevail. So I think this...
So goodbye to the specialists. Let's have a look at the responses that we've seen. AI has the ability to overtake an increasingly larger part of the decision-making process. Depending on the context, humans could give complete autonomy to it or integrate it into their own tasks. This is a scenario that is complex because I don't see a role for the designer here. Bülent, what's your reaction to it?
Not really. I can't say anything really meaningful, but what I would say, I think I agree with that, the dichotomy of specialist and the generalist, that ability to go in, get support in very technical details creates a lot of space for creativity, in not only in architecture, in all other fields. And every field has its own different types of design. And I think that holds, I agree with that trend.
But how do you see the role of the non-human agents within our algorithms or data models? For in that case, how do you see that influencing the decision-making?
Yeah, like
process?
That's what we're experimenting in a hypothetical speculative design, is using one of the model we created, which is called green unified scenarios, where we bring agency to different life forms. And what's being combined is that simulating this interactions with these life forms under certain scenarios creates an incredible amount of data. It was difficult to communicate, to digest the data and bring to the common sense and common space. Using AI will enable digesting that synthetically but validated data, which means we will be able to have more perspective, longer-term predictions about what will happen to biodiversity in the city under different, whether built environment or natural environment. So that, I think that will hopefully give more space now to actually say, what is the right of the tree here? What's the right of the bee here? Instead of visually thinking, oh, this is nice to have.
And in that sense, AI has the ability to overtake an increasingly larger part of the decision-making process through what you describe here.
Yeah.
And you can, give complete autonomy to it because you have that voice of the non-human representation being represented in that decision-making process.
Yeah. I guess one of the
totally agree with that. I just I could carefully read this.
Sorry.
I totally agree. I think it's very nicely formulated.
Yeah.
I don't know who was this in the audience.
Yeah, but
you get a plus. Okay.
Yeah, Ekim, I guess in one of the experiments you had, where even it's LLM models that representing river or other life forms, we can bring these entities to the table. And of course, there's always question of to what extent we are human-centrically modeling them. Yeah. That's a question will remain as a valid question, but there's a chance to bring into the to the table and to the discussion.
Let's just have a look if we can have one other reaction here as well. AI can do really good work because of the speed and capacity in which they can process information. But the intuition or the sixth sense that humans are blessed with gives us an edge. Go right ahead.
So back in 2015, I wrote my master thesis on how machine learning, we still call it machine learning back then, could make life simpler. Big question. But by that time, Kai-Fu Lee, a really big computer scientist at Stanford, he is, I believe, this is what he said. This is the only thing, and I think it's still not proven anywhere. There's no indicator that human intuition, which is a magical thing, can be automated. And I feel like you always have this discussion about like overtaking and like agentic AI doing the whole thing. And I think it's interesting that we even ask that question, because it's like we're inviting someone in our team, and the only way we're framing it is this person going to make me redundant?
That's a very human response, actually.
It's a very human response. It's like an ego response, right?
But I would like
it's
to
about like what
something.
can AI do really well?
Of course, but what I think is interesting about this question is that what is this being described as the sixth sense that humans have, that you agree with. They used to talk about that sixth sense or that intuition in art as well. But now we've seen artworks being produced by AI or novels being written by AI, which won prizes actually, or artworks that are being seen as made by a human artist. So if we can copy that intuition of creating art and giving us the impression that it was made by a human,
But it was made by a human, prompting the AI.
So the basis is...
It was a collaboration.
It was a collaboration, okay.
So for example, this washed out video, like that won a lot of prizes, it was an artist collaborating with AI. And I think that's where the juice is. That's where the fun is.
Okay. Thank you so much. I would like to give the audience opportunities to ask questions in regard to what we've said here. Is there anybody who would like to pose a question to anybody of the panel? It's quite dark there, so I couldn't see.
Thank you for the interesting conversation. Very interesting. I just formulated, so where do we find the intersect between decision making, trust in these models, and this AI as a tool? I think I come from a master where we were using engineering for policy analysis. And it really gave a picture that the world is solvable using models, using tools, using simulations, analysis. But when I stepped outside of my master, I realized that it's far from reality because we don't trust the output. And this is implementing human scenarios, or what we humans thought would be scenarios. Now we're incorporating, or I used in my thesis, AI to identify vulnerable scenarios. And that's a step further. And we're still not even at the first step to trust human intuition in models. How can we trust AI now? And I would really like to find the answer, because we do need it for the future.
Is there anybody in the panel who would like to react to that?
I could take it. I think a big part of the conversation that we're not having about AIs as we talk about scaling them and what a future looks like when we reach the singularity and whatnot is value systems. Like we don't actually talk about what value systems exist where these machines are created and where the models are trained, or what value systems they've adopted by way of training. Where I'm from, we have this value system called Ubuntu, which is like renowned for the way it places community above self and whatnot. And I didn't realize how rare that was until I moved here, because I could just by show of hands, like, what value system do you, and it'll be like maybe one or two hands here. But I think thinking deeply and critically about what value system AI models that will scale, that will be used autonomously to make decisions that will ultimately impact the lives of people, just think about what what that actually looks like. Is there a framework for that that people can agree on? Is there some kind of convention for what we prioritize that can then trickle down to every other use case for AI? I think that might be the way to do it. But yeah, that's just my take.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's also, I mean, there are different political regimes, there are different governances, there are different decision-making processes, as we, endless. And if you look at the scientific publication, you see, for example, metaverse as a local government. So you see a lot of these articles being published also in a place such as United States, where local government budgets are super minimal, where there is sometimes one or none persons for representing local government. And I think it's a human decision again to give the autonomy to AI. But if you, at the moment that you decide to give the autonomy to AI, it is AI's, right? I think it's a choice that will be made eventually by humans, but I think it is technically possible to do that.
If I may add to this, without transparency, there's no trust. There's a belief. We can believe in things, but we need transparency. What I see on the positive side, that we are able to bring in causality to, even in a narrow case, we are able to bring in causality, which means we can actually discuss, debate using all the normative process, democratic process. So what's value system A? How we can generate data to train AIs that represent its value system, and bring in causality, which means not only using statistical connections, but actually retraining those cleaned models that we know what is the principles are based on, so we can question them and we can change them. I think this is the way to go transparency. With that transparency, we can create trust. Trust means that we know what's going to happen, we can change it, we can challenge it.
Yeah. Thank you. Final? Because I would like to use one more person in the audience, but go right ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to give so in the example of the healthcare, the avatar system, I think that's what's really special. It's the city of Amsterdam that took the initiative there, and they incorporated everyone. So the family doctors, the social workers, the youth psychiatrists, not everyone, but 9 different partners. And I think the most important outcome is not the nice prototypes, but it's that we made the values very explicit and put that in the governance. And I think that's something that can then be used to go over the LLMs, because
and don't see it as a frozen thing. See it as a thing that is negotiable. That is
it's open, your compass. It's what we're
evolves
feeling.
with you. Exactly.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. A final question from the audience over there.
So while regenerating the data, somewhere in the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned about a term called controlled bias. My question is, what is a controlled bias to you? And can you give me an example for use case of it?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Bias, in the sense, is that when we look into existing data, whatever happening in the society is represented in the data, which means majority are being more represented. A controlled bias as a concept will be, we do controlled positive discrimination, if you say in the old term. So which means when we look into, let's say, job matching algorithm, and we know that we need to give more inclusivity to certain types of profiles, that with the data, we may be able to say, with this specific feature, that will have 2 times more chance than if it has this color. Just really being clear. Say, we want to promote underrepresented certain types of members of society, making it clear and making it accessible and available in the data. So that's a control bias. And we can have consensus on that. So no bias is not good. We need to have bias, but a control bias. That's what I mean.
Did that clear it up? Yeah. Very good. Final question. Anybody? Your final? Oh, there's no microphone. Just scream and I'll repeat it.
Where does the liability go with AI? I mean, so I'm an architect.
Where does the liability go with AI? You're an architect?
If the building falls over, I get sued.
If the building falls over, she gets sued.
If the building is designed by AI.
But if the building is designed by AI, is the AI responsible? Ekim, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I think maybe the developers who who created AI would be eventually.
But it's interesting. There's no regulation yet because
yeah.
That's
We
the
talked about
conclusion.
it also.
It's quite a new domain that we don't know yet what role government is playing, and I think that what we mentioned before, government should take up that should take that part in order to guide us within the
I
jungle
think
that
that
it is
domain
now.
needs to really progress really fast. I mean, it's always reactive, so things are being innovated, and then the regulation tries to respond, like trying to run after.
Yeah.
But I think we are running really slow after.
Yeah, they're just walking.
Yeah.
All right. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of this program. We have come to the end of your third program, and now we have to almost say goodbye to Designing Cities for All. I would like to state here, thank you so much. Thank you for your time, thank you for your insights, and thank you for the guidance within the topics that you've led us through through the past 3 episodes. Please give a warm hand.
Thank you. Yeah, I thank also for the audience, for the good questions, but also for the experts being here.
No, a very warm thank you as well. If I just give you a bullet round, a very quick question based on what we've seen here, what's the final thing that we should take out or should take with us in the future? Just one sentence.
Well, I'm very enthusiastic about bringing causality and explainability in AI, and I think we should all support the direction in the frontier.
Thank you.
I would say let's not think about AI that replaces humans, but that complements humans and that gives superpowers to the humans.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, more or less the same thing, just optimistic about an AI-enabled future and what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think my takeaway is when I look at all the AI tools being developed, I see how all of them works really great with city games. I mean, they are all partners to city games. In the ones that visualize, that use language models that simulate future or speculate about future. I think they are all good partners for city games.
And if you have to give let's say we'll be here in 10 years again. Together. And looking back on the past 10 years, what developments would you encourage and what developments would really make you very happy in that regard?
Yeah, I think, as I said, on the governance side, I mean, technically, if I see the tools that are being developed, they are all hopeful, they are all interesting, smart, they are all there. And I think it really depends on us what we make out of it, how we will use it, for which purpose are we going to use them. So I think in 10 years, I wish that we all mapped informal settlements and we used AI for example, urban resilience so well that we could minimize the flood, for example, how do we deal with it, or earthquakes, etc. So there are so much potential in it, and how we can use it, how we can place it. And also the governance part is somehow, I don't know, what needs to happen, what sort of miracle we need to, that it needs to be fast. I think it needs to really, we have to design systems, put them in place so that, as something is innovated, there are also very creative and open rules that are also responding to that, just like on spot. I think that would be my wish.
Great. And what's the biggest surprise that you've encountered within the 3 programs that we did?
I think maybe it's in the discussion, in the second discussion, when we were talking about governance and all the risks, I think to find ourselves in such a pessimistic point, and then at some moment Thomas' reaction saying like, hey, maybe we should actually still be hopeful. And I think I think that was for me the moment to realize, yes, you can be, we need to be cautious, we need to be, all of that, but I think it's also all depends on us, what we make out of it, and let's all of us make sure that we find a good relevant use of AI to work it for us and with us.
And I see there's this final online question, and then we'll close off. It's like me not able to say goodbye, right? Talking about how AI can reduce biases and be more inclusive, but what about communities whose data is being fed by someone else because they can't for themselves? Isn't that still somehow presumptuous? there is always this filter that it goes through. So how can we rely on the neutrality?
Direct data, you mean, like how?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you have a point there. That's why we need city games. We need, I mean, as much as clean data, whatever data you talk, precise data you talk about, we need to be able to negotiate. We need to be able to talk about data, narrate it collectively, so we know what sort of data we are, so that it's not an abstract data that it's through someone else fed into the system, but we know what we are talking about.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, we've finally reached the end, which is it's a moment. What I take away from these discussions, which I found very interesting and very enriching in itself, so thank you so much for that, is that I've got the feeling that AI is the dynamite of our time. Dynamite was invented to do something good, to clear the roads, to clear it from rocks, and it was being used for something else. And finally, we got some regulation in regard to dynamite, but to have that risk, the good parts and also the dangers, we should be very aware of that. And we really should rely on the governments in order to create a context where AI can flourish and can be used to further society. And I do think, and I didn't realize that was possible as well, through the conversations that we had tonight, but also previously, that AI can be used for that good and that it takes a great responsibility. Like my favorite philosopher, Spider-Man, says, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that's the final thought that I would like to close this programs off with. This is the final program of the fellowship, but next week we've got a Designing Cities for All special program on the topic of AI and identity and the challenges of marginalized groups. Please make sure that you will attend that as well, because that's going to be really, really interesting as well. And finally, we have the Designing Cities for All grand finale, which marks the end of this program after 4 years, and that it will involve the launch of the third book. And it's got the title, Closing Perspective on Designing Cities for All, and that will happen on December 16th. So mark that in your diaries. There is a collaboration with Femdata in February, and it's also possible, if you like the programs that we presented, if you like the themes, to become a friend of Pakhuis de Zwijger, and in that way support the Pakhuis as well. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching for 4 years. Thank you for watching Designing Cities for All. And if you would like to see the episodes that we already made, there are over 100 episodes. You could go online and find the programs there. I thank you for your attention and have a very good evening. Thank you so much. And I would like to give a big hand to the people behind the scenes that made it possible. This was the idea of Dimphy Brown. She asked me to tag along, but after Dimphy, there came a lot of people, a lot of experts to share their knowledge, and a lot of fellows as well. So please give everybody who made this possible a great hand. Thank you.